Marcus Thornton grabbed his wife by the arm and dragged her through 300 guests at his own birthday party. He shoved her out the front door of the Peninsula Hotel, and she fell hard onto the wet Chicago sidewalk. Her knee split open. Her heel snapped. Blood mixed with rain. "You're garbage," he spat down at her. "Don't come back." He didn't know the woman bleeding at his feet was the sole heir to a $12 billion empire. In 3 hours, she wouldn't just take back her dignity. She would take everything he owned. Comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The champagne glass shattered against the marble floor and 300 heads turned toward the sound. Elena Marsh stood frozen, her hand still extended where the glass had slipped from her fingers. Red wine spread across the pristine white jacket of the man in front of her like a bloodstain. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. What the hell is wrong with you?" The voice didn't belong to the man she'd spilled on. It belonged to her husband. Marcus Thornton cut through the crowd like a shark through water. His face was twisted with fury, his eyes burning with something Elena had learned to fear over 3 years of marriage, the look he got when she embarrassed him in public. "Marcus, it was an accident. Shut up." He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into her flesh hard enough to bruise. He yanked her close, his breath hot against her ear. "Do you have any idea who that is? That's Richard Hayes. He controls the fund that's going to save my company, and you just ruined his jacket. I'll pay for the cleaning. I'll apologize. Just let me—" "You'll pay." Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "With what money, Elena? You don't have money. You don't have anything. Everything you own I gave you." Richard Hayes, a silver-haired man with the calm demeanor of someone who'd seen every kind of scene money could create, held up his hand. "Mr. Thornton, please. It's just wine. The lady seems distressed. Perhaps we could—" "She's drunk." A new voice cut in sharp as broken glass. Victoria Thornton, Marcus's mother, emerged from the crowd. She wore emerald silk that probably cost more than Elena's entire wardrobe, and her face held the permanent expression of someone who'd just smelled something rotten. "She's been drinking all night," Victoria continued loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. "I told Marcus not to bring her, but he insisted. Out of pity, of course." "I haven't had a single drink," Elena said, her voice shaking. "Not one. I've been drinking water all night because you can't afford champagne taste on your own." Victoria smiled, and it was the cruelest thing Elena had ever seen. "Darling, everyone here knows what you are. A stray Marcus picked up out of charity. The least you could do is stay in the corner and not embarrass the family." Elena felt the heat rise to her face. 300 people were watching. 300 of Chicago's elite, all staring at her like she was an exhibit at a zoo. "Victoria, please," Elena whispered. "Not here." "Not here. This is exactly where." Victoria turned to the crowd playing to her audience. "Did you all know that when Marcus met her, she was working at a coffee shop? A coffee shop. And now she stands in the Peninsula Hotel, surrounded by people who actually belong here, and she can't even hold a glass of wine without making a mess." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Quiet, polite, devastating laughter. Elena looked for Marcus, hoping, praying that he would defend her. That somewhere inside him was still the man who'd told her 3 years ago that he loved her simplicity. That she grounded him. That she was the best thing that ever happened to him. Marcus wasn't looking at her. He was looking at Serena Walsh, the daughter of Senator Walsh, who stood nearby in a red dress that left nothing to the imagination. Serena was smirking, her phone raised, recording the entire scene. "Marcus," Elena said quietly, "can we please just go home? Please." He finally looked at her, and in his eyes she saw nothing. No love, no compassion, not even anger anymore, just disgust. "Go home," he laughed. "Elena, look at yourself. Look at what you're wearing." She looked down at her dress. It was navy blue, simple classic. She'd bought it at Macy's 3 years ago, before she'd married Marcus, when she still had her own job and her own money and her own dignity. "It's a nice dress," she said weakly. "It's a costume." Marcus gestured around the room. "Everyone here is wearing designers. Versace, Chanel, custom pieces that cost more than the house you grew up in. And you show up looking like the help. I asked you for money to buy a new dress. You said no. You said I didn't need to waste money on clothes because I wasn't important enough for anyone to notice. And I was right." Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "No one notices you, Elena. No one cares about you. You're invisible. You're nothing. The only reason you exist is because I allow you to exist." Elena felt something crack inside her chest. Not her heart that had broken a long time ago. This was something deeper, something foundational. "Marcus, I'm your wife." "You're a mistake." He said it simply, like he was stating a fact. "A mistake I made when I was young and stupid and thought that marrying someone real would make me look humble. But you know what? I'm not humble. I'm Marcus Thornton, and I deserve someone who matches my status. Someone like Serena Walsh." The words slipped out before Elena could stop them. She saw Marcus's face change, saw the flash of guilt quickly replaced by rage. "What did you say?" "I'm not blind, Marcus. I see the way you look at her. I see the late nights. I found the hotel receipts. I know what you've been doing." For a moment, Marcus said nothing. Then he smiled a cold, terrible smile that made Elena's blood run ice. "You know what, Elena? You're smarter than I gave you credit for." He leaned in close. "Yes. Serena and I have been seeing each other. For 6 months. And when my company's IPO launches next month and I'm worth $500 million, I'm going to divorce you, marry her, and you're going to get nothing. Because I've had lawyers working for months to make sure every asset is protected, every penny, every stock option. You'll walk away with the clothes on your back, which, let's be honest, aren't worth much." Elena couldn't breathe. The room was spinning. 300 people were watching her marriage end in real time, and she couldn't breathe. "You can't do this," she whispered. "I gave you everything. I gave up my job, my apartment, my friends, everything, for you. And that was your choice." Marcus straightened his tie. "A stupid choice, but yours nonetheless. Now I'm going to go back to the party. I'm going to charm Richard Hayes. I'm going to close the deal that saves my company. And you're going to leave." "Leave, Marcus. I don't have a coat. I don't have money for a cab. It's raining outside and—" "Not my problem." He grabbed her arm again, harder this time, and started walking toward the doors. Elena stumbled her heel, catching on the carpet. "Marcus, stop. You're hurting me." "Good." The crowd parted as Marcus dragged his wife through the ballroom. Some people looked away. Some people pulled out their phones to record. No one helped. Victoria followed behind her heels, clicking on the marble. "Finally," she said to no one in particular. "I've been waiting 3 years for him to come to his senses." They reached the grand double doors. Marcus shoved them open with his shoulder, pulling Elena into the hotel lobby. The concierge looked up, startled. The doorman took a half-step forward, then stopped when Marcus shot him a warning look. "Marcus, please." Elena was crying now, tears streaming down her face. "At least let me get my coat. At least let me call someone." "Call who?" Marcus laughed. "Your parents are dead. You don't have any family. You don't have any friends, I made sure of that. Who are you going to call, Elena? Who in this entire world gives a damn about you?" He pushed through the revolving door, dragging her out into the night. The rain hit Elena like a physical assault. It was cold, Chicago cold, the kind that seeped into your bones and made you feel like you'd never be warm again. Within seconds, her dress was soaked through. Her hair plastered to her face. Her makeup ran down her cheeks in black streaks. "Marcus, please, I'm begging you." He let go of her arm. She stumbled backward, her heel catching on the metal grate of the entryway mat. There was a crack, loud and sharp, and suddenly she was falling. She hit the concrete hard. Her knee took the worst of it, splitting open on the rough surface. Blood bloomed through her stockings, mixing with the rain and running down her leg. For a moment, no one moved. Elena lay on the wet sidewalk, bleeding and shaking, looking up at the man she had married. The man she had trusted. The man she had believed would love her forever. Marcus looked down at her, and he smiled. "You know what, Elena? This is exactly where you belong. On the ground, in the dirt. That's what you've always been, dirt. And I was a fool for ever thinking I could polish you into something more." "Marcus?" She reached up toward him, not knowing what she was asking for. Help. Mercy. One small moment of the man she thought she'd married. He stepped back, brushing off his sleeves as if her touch had contaminated him. "I'm going back inside. I have investors to charm and a future wife to dance with. Don't come back to the penthouse tonight. Or ever, actually. I'll have your things packed and sent to wherever it is people like you go." He turned his back on her and walked toward the revolving door. "You're pathetic," he said over his shoulder. "Absolutely pathetic." The door spun, swallowing him up. Through the glass, Elena could see the warm glow of the lobby, could see Marcus straightening his tie and smoothing back his hair, transforming back into the charming businessman, the devoted son, the golden boy of Chicago's tech scene. Elena sat on the sidewalk for a long moment. The rain continued to fall. Her knee continued to bleed. Passers-by gave her a wide berth, crossing to the other side of the street to avoid the crazy woman sitting in the gutter. She was nothing. Just like Marcus said, she was nobody. She had nowhere to go. Slowly, mechanically, Elena unbuckled her broken shoe and threw it into the gutter. She stood up on one bare foot and one heeled foot, swaying slightly. Blood ran down her leg. Rain ran down her face. She opened her clutch, the small cheap clutch she'd bought at Target, because Marcus said designer bags were wasted on her, and looked inside. A lipstick, a tissue, a single crumpled dollar bill, and a piece of paper. Elena stared at the paper. It was old, worn, soft from years of being carried. She'd kept it in the lining of every purse she'd owned since she was 8 years old. 20 years. Through foster homes and college dorms and her first apartment and her marriage, this piece of paper had traveled with her. She'd never used it. She'd never even thought about using it. Her mother had given it to her the morning before the accident, pressing it into her small hands with an intensity that had frightened her. "If you're ever truly alone," her mother had whispered, "if you ever have no one left in the world, call this number. Tell them who you are. Tell them your real name." Elena had been 4 years old. She hadn't understood. And then her parents were dead, and she was in the system, and the paper became just another remnant of a life she could barely remember. But she'd kept it. Through everything, she'd kept it. Now, standing on a Chicago sidewalk with nothing left to lose, Elena pulled out her phone. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely dial. The rain was making it hard to see the screen. But she managed one digit at a time to enter the number. It rang once, twice. "Kingsley Residence Private Line." The voice was British formal, the kind of voice that answered phones in mansions, not houses. Elena's voice cracked. She cleared her throat and tried again. "I need to speak to William Kingsley." "Mr. Kingsley does not accept unsolicited calls. Who is calling, please?" Elena looked up at the Peninsula Hotel. Through the windows, she could see the glow of the ballroom. She could imagine Marcus inside, laughing, charming, pretending the last 10 minutes had never happened. "Tell him it's Elena," she said. "Elena Marie Kingsley. Tell him his granddaughter is calling." The silence on the other end was absolute. Elena thought the line had gone dead. Then, "Hold, please. Do not hang up. I am transferring you immediately." 15 seconds of classical music, then a click. Then a voice that sounded like old mountains and iron, and something fierce and protective that Elena didn't recognize but somehow remembered. "Elena, is it really you?" "Grandfather." The word felt strange in her mouth. She'd never said it before. Never had anyone to say it to. "Where are you?" The voice was commanding, urgent. Are you safe? I'm... Elena looked down at her bleeding knee, her ruined dress, her bare foot standing in a puddle. I'm outside the Peninsula Hotel. In Chicago. Are you hurt? I don't... I fell. My knee is bleeding. But it's not bad. I think I'm just... Who did this to you? The question was sharp, dangerous. Elena realized that whoever this man was, whatever her connection to him, he was not someone who asked questions lightly. My husband, she said. Marcus Thornton. He threw me out of his party, in front of everyone. He said I was nothing. He said I had no one. He said... He was wrong. The voice cut through her words like a blade. Stay exactly where you are. Do not move. I am in Chicago. I was here on business. I will be there in 15 minutes. Can you wait 15 minutes? Yes, I can wait. Elena. The voice softened just slightly, just enough. I have been looking for you for 20 years. I hired investigators. I bribed officials. I turned over every stone on this earth trying to find you. And now you're telling me you've been here all along, married to some insect who throws you into the street like garbage. I didn't know, Elena whispered. I didn't know I had anyone. I thought I was alone. You are not alone. You have never been alone. You just didn't know it yet. A pause. Stay where you are, child. Help is coming. And as for Marcus Thornton, the voice dropped to something cold and terrible. He is about to learn a very important lesson about consequences. The line went dead. Elena lowered the phone. The rain was still falling, but she barely felt it anymore. She was looking down the street, watching for headlights, waiting for whoever was coming. 3 minutes later, she saw them. First, a single black SUV turning the corner at high speed. Then another. Then a third. And finally sliding between them like a shark among pilot fish, a limousine so long and so dark it seemed to swallow the streetlights. The convoy pulled up to the curb. Doors opened. Men in dark suits with earpieces stepped out, scanning the street with professional efficiency. Then, the back door of the limousine opened. The man who emerged was old but not frail. His hair was silver, his face was lined with years, but his eyes were sharp and bright and burning with an emotion Elena couldn't name. He wore a cashmere coat that probably cost more than Marcus's car, and he carried himself like a king. He looked at Elena. Really looked at her, taking in the bleeding knee and the ruined dress and the bare foot and the mascara tears, and something in his face crumbled. My girl, he said, his voice breaking. My poor lost girl. He crossed the distance between them in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. Elena stood there rigid with shock. She couldn't remember the last time anyone had hugged her. Marcus had stopped touching her months ago except in anger. But this was warm. This was protective. This was a grandfather holding his granddaughter for the first time in 20 years and not caring that the rain was ruining his coat or that she was bleeding on his cashmere. I've got you, he murmured into her hair. I've got you now. You're safe. Elena broke. All the tears she'd been holding back, all the years of loneliness and pretending she was fine, all the nights wondering why she wasn't enough, it all came pouring out. She sobbed into his chest like a child, and he held her, and the rain kept falling, and the world kept spinning, and for the first time in her life, Elena Marsh. Elena Kingsley didn't feel alone. When she finally pulled back, William was looking up at the Peninsula Hotel. His eyes had changed. The warmth was gone, replaced by something cold and calculating, and absolutely terrifying. Is he still in there? William asked. Your husband? Yes. He's trying to close a deal with some investor, Richard Hayes. It's supposed to save his company from bankruptcy. William laughed. It was not a nice laugh. Richard Hayes, he said, works for me. I sent him here to evaluate your husband's company. I was considering acquiring it as a minor asset. He looked down at Elena and his smile was sharp. I've changed my mind. What do you mean? I mean, my dear, that Marcus Thornton threw out his wife tonight. He thought he was discarding a burden. William took Elena's face in his hands, his thumbs wiping away her tears. He doesn't know that he just declared war on the Kingsley Empire, and we don't lose wars. He released her and turned to one of his security men. Get my granddaughter in the car. Keep her warm. Clean up that knee. He started toward the hotel entrance, then paused. And send for the stylist team. I want them at the Four Seasons in 1 hour. Sir? The security man looked confused. The stylists tonight? William looked back at Elena and his smile was predatory. Tonight we're going back to that party. And when we walk through those doors, every person in that room is going to learn exactly who they laughed at. He offered Elena his arm. What do you say, granddaughter? Are you ready to meet the family business? Elena looked at the Peninsula Hotel. She thought about Marcus inside celebrating her humiliation. She thought about Victoria's cruel smile and Serena's recording phone and all the people who had watched her fall and done nothing. She thought about 20 years of being nobody, being nothing, being alone. Yes, she said, taking her grandfather's arm. I'm ready. William Kingsley smiled, and it was the smile of a man who had just been handed exactly what he wanted. Good, he said. Because Marcus Thornton has about 3 hours left as a rich man. After tonight, he won't even have his dignity. He guided Elena toward the limousine, and the security team fell in around them like a protective wall. Behind them, the Peninsula Hotel glowed golden in the rain, completely unaware that the woman they had thrown out like garbage was about to return as a hurricane. The limousine door closed behind Elena, sealing her inside a world of warm leather and soft light. She was shivering uncontrollably now, the shock of everything finally catching up with her body. A security man handed her a blanket, cashmere impossibly soft, and she wrapped it around herself like armor. William slid in beside her, tapping the partition twice. The car began to move immediately. The Four Seasons, William said to no one in particular. Presidential suite. Tell them to clear the floor. Elena stared at him. In the soft glow of the car's interior lights, she could see his face more clearly now. The sharp cheekbones, the strong jaw, the eyes that were exactly the same honey brown as her own. You look like your father, William said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. Same eyes, same stubborn chin. He had that same look when he told me he was leaving the family. I don't remember him very well, Elena admitted. I was only 4 when they died. I remember flashes, his laugh, the way he smelled like coffee and old books, but the details are gone. He was brilliant. William's voice was heavy with old grief. Could have run the company. Could have been one of the most powerful men in the country. But he wanted a simple life. He wanted to be a college professor. He wanted to marry for love, not advantage. He laughed softly. He wanted to raise you away from what he called the vultures. Why didn't you come for me after the accident? The question had been burning inside her since the moment she heard his voice on the phone. 20 years of foster homes. 20 years of being nobody. 20 years of wondering why she was so fundamentally unlovable that not a single person in the world wanted her. William closed his eyes, and for a moment he looked every one of his 78 years. I was in Tokyo when it happened. A business deal that couldn't wait. By the time I got back to the States, you were already in the system. The records were sealed. Your name had been changed, some bureaucratic error, they said, though I've always suspected it was intentional. Someone wanted you lost. Who? I don't know. I've spent 20 years and more money than most countries' GDP trying to find out. He opened his eyes, and they were burning with old rage. Your father had enemies, people who didn't want him to ever come back to the company. People who thought that if his daughter disappeared, the threat would disappear with her. Threat. What threat? I was 4 years old. You were the heir. William took her hand, his grip surprisingly strong. Your father was my only child. When he died, everything, the company, the properties, the investments, all of it was supposed to pass to you. But with you gone, the board thought they could carve up the empire, take what they wanted, bury the rest. What happened to them? The board members. William smiled, and it was cold. They learned that I don't forgive, and I don't forget. It took me 15 years, but I destroyed every single one of them. Bankrupted some, imprisoned others. One fled to a country with no extradition treaty and has been living in a concrete bunker ever since, terrified to step outside. Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with her wet clothes. You did all that for revenge. I did all that because they took you from me. They looked at a grieving old man and thought he was weak. They were wrong. He squeezed her hand. And now Marcus Thornton has made the same mistake. He looked at you and saw nothing. He will learn as they learned what it costs to underestimate a Kingsley. The car pulled to a stop. Elena looked out the window and saw the Four Seasons rising above them, its lights glowing gold against the rainy sky. Grandfather, she said slowly, testing the word. What exactly are we going to do? William helped her out of the car, holding an umbrella over her head with old-fashioned courtesy. First, we're going to get you warm and dry. Then we're going to clean that knee, it's still bleeding, and that's unacceptable. And then... He guided her toward the entrance where the staff was already lined up waiting. Then, we're going to transform you into who you really are. And we're going to go back to that party. Go back. Elena stopped walking. I can't go back there. You didn't see their faces. You didn't hear them laughing. They all watched him drag me out and none of them did anything. They just stood there with their champagne and their phones and... Exactly. William's voice was gentle but firm. They watched you fall. Now they're going to watch you rise. And when you walk through those doors tonight, Elena, they're going to realize that they laughed at the wrong woman. But I don't have anything to wear. I don't have jewelry. I don't even have shoes. One of mine is in a gutter somewhere. William laughed, a genuine sound of amusement. My darling girl, in about 45 minutes you're going to be wearing a dress that cost more than your husband's car. You're going to have the Kingsley star around your neck, a sapphire that belonged to your grandmother, who wore it to meet the Queen of England. And as for shoes, he winked. I know a man at Louboutin who owes me a favor. They entered the hotel, and it was like stepping into another world. The staff didn't just acknowledge them, they practically genuflected. The manager appeared out of nowhere, bowing so deeply, Elena was afraid he'd hurt his back. Mr. Kingsley, such an honor. The presidential suite is ready. The team you requested arrived 10 minutes ago. Is there anything else you need? Privacy, William said simply. No one enters that floor without my personal approval. No exceptions. Of course, sir. Absolutely, sir. They took a private elevator to the top floor. When the doors opened, Elena gasped. The suite was the size of a small house. But it wasn't the size that took her breath away. It was the people. At least a dozen men and women stood at attention, surrounded by racks of clothing, cases of jewelry, and enough beauty supplies to stock a department store. This is my granddaughter, William announced to the room. She's been through hell tonight. You have 1 hour to make her look like heaven. Can you do it? A tiny woman with silver hair and fierce eyes stepped forward. Mr. Kingsley, we could make a goddess in half that time. Leave her to us. William turned to Elena. I have some calls to make, some pieces to move into place. Are you going to be all right? Elena looked at the room full of strangers, at the racks of designer clothes, at the glittering jewelry that probably cost more than she'd make in 10 lifetimes. A week ago, she would have run. An hour ago, she would have hidden. But something had shifted inside her. Something that had been sleeping for a very long time was starting to wake up. I'll be fine, she said. Do what you need to do. William kissed her forehead, a gesture so tender and unexpected that Elena felt tears prick her eyes again. That's my girl, he said. When I come back, we go to war. He left, and the room descended on Elena like a beautiful, terrifying storm. "Shoes off, well, shoe off," the silver-haired woman commanded. "Get that dress off her. Carefully, don't rip it. It might be cheap, but it's evidence. Someone photograph the knee before we clean it. Document everything." "Evidence?" Elena asked as hands began unbuttoning her dress. "Evidence of what? Of what he did to you?" The woman's voice softened slightly. "I've worked for Mr. Kingsley for 30 years. I've seen him angry before. I've never seen him like this. Whatever your husband did tonight, he's going to pay for it. And when he does, we'll want proof of what you looked like when he threw you away." Elena stood in her slip as a photographer circled her, snapping pictures of her scraped knee, her bruised arm, her ruined makeup. It should have felt humiliating. Instead, it felt like the first page of a new chapter. "Now," the silver-haired woman said, "let's talk about the dress." For the next hour, Elena was transformed. First came the knee cleaned, bandaged, treated with something that numbed the pain almost instantly. Then a shower hot enough to wash away the chill that had settled into her bones. Then the makeup artist who took one look at her tear-swollen eyes and clucked her tongue with professional sympathy. "We're going to make you look powerful," the artist said, dabbing primer onto Elena's skin. "Not pretty, not sweet, powerful. When you walk into that room tonight, I want every woman to feel inferior and every man to feel afraid." "I don't know if I can pull that off." "Honey," the artist met her eyes in the mirror. "You survived 3 years married to a narcissist who tried to erase you. You just climbed off a sidewalk where he left you bleeding, and you're still standing. Trust me, you can pull off anything." The dress came next. Elena had never seen anything like it. Floor-length silver fabric that shimmered like liquid mercury, covered in thousands of tiny crystals that caught the light with every movement. It had a slit up the left leg, bold, dramatic, scandalous by her usual standards. The neckline plunged just enough to suggest confidence without crossing into desperation. "Try it on," the silver-haired woman ordered. Elena stepped into the dress, and it fit like it had been made for her. "How is this possible?" she breathed, staring at herself in the mirror. "You couldn't have known my size." "Mr. Kingsley sent your measurements from the car. He said you'd bought a dress at Macy's 3 years ago, and the receipt was still in his file on you. He's been tracking you longer than you know." Elena didn't know how to feel about that. The idea that she'd been watched, documented, researched it should have been creepy. But somehow knowing that someone had been looking for her all those years, that someone had wanted to find her, it felt like proof that she mattered. The shoes arrived next. A Louboutin courier, breathless and rain-soaked, burst through the door carrying a box like it contained the crown jewels. Inside were heels covered in matching crystals, 4 inches high, impossibly beautiful. "I can't walk in these," Elena said, even as she slipped them on. "My knee." "You'll walk," the silver-haired woman said firmly. "Pain is temporary. Glory is forever. Besides, we've given you enough pain medication to numb an elephant. You won't feel a thing until tomorrow, and by then you'll have already won." The final touch was the jewelry. William returned just as they were debating between 3 different necklaces. He took one look at the options and shook his head. "No. None of these. Mr. Kingsley, the Cartier piece is worth $3 million. I didn't say they weren't valuable. I said they weren't right." He reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a velvet box. "This is right." He opened the box, and everyone in the room fell silent. The Kingsley star sat on black velvet like a captured piece of the sky. The sapphire at its center was the size of a small egg surrounded by diamonds that flashed like fire. It was old Victorian, maybe earlier, but it had been maintained with the kind of obsessive care that only old money understands. "This belonged to your grandmother," William said quietly, lifting the necklace from its case. "She wore it to Buckingham Palace. She wore it to the Met Gala in 1962. She wore it the night your father was born." He fastened it around Elena's neck, and the weight of it settled against her chest like a benediction. Now you wear it. To destroy a man who thought you were worthless. Elena looked at herself in the mirror. The woman staring back was a stranger. The mousy, apologetic wife who flinched at loud noises and apologized for existing was gone. In her place stood someone else entirely. Someone with sharp eyes and sharper cheekbones. Someone who looked like she could buy and sell kingdoms. Someone who looked like a Kingsley. There she is, William said softly, standing behind her. There's my granddaughter. I don't recognize myself. You're not supposed to. The woman you were died on that sidewalk tonight. This is who you're becoming. He met her eyes in the mirror. Now are you ready to learn a few things before we go back? What things? William guided her to a chair and sat opposite her. His security team melted into the background, giving them space. First, you need to understand what's about to happen. When we walk into that party, everything changes. Not just for you, for Marcus, for his company, for everyone who watched him throw you out and did nothing. I'm not a man who does things by halves, Elena. When I destroy someone, I don't leave pieces behind. What are you going to do to him? That depends on you. William leaned forward, his expression serious. I can make him uncomfortable. I can make his investors nervous, delay his deals, give him a few sleepless nights. That's the gentle option. It's not what he deserves, but if you want mercy for him, I'll respect that. And the other option? I burn him to the ground. His company, his reputation, his bank accounts, his future, everything he has, everything he is, everything he ever hoped to be gone. Not just bankrupt, destroyed. The kind of destruction that follows a man for the rest of his life, that makes people cross the street to avoid him, that turns his name into a cautionary tale. Elena was quiet for a long moment. She thought about Marcus's smile when he pushed her down, the casual cruelty in his voice, the years of small humiliations that had added up to a complete erasure of who she used to be. 6 months ago, she said slowly. I found hotel receipts in his coat. I confronted him about it. I was shaking. I'd never confronted him about anything before. Do you know what he said? Tell me. He laughed. He said, What are you going to do about it? Leave and go where you have nothing. You are nothing. You should be grateful I keep you around at all. And then he went out to dinner with Serena Walsh, while I sat in our apartment and cried. William's jaw tightened. And after that? After that, I stopped confronting him. I stopped fighting. I just gave up. I told myself that maybe he was right. Maybe I was nothing. Maybe I should just be grateful to have a roof over my head and food to eat. I stopped being Elena. I became whatever he wanted me to be, a ghost in my own life. And now... Elena looked down at her hands, the hands that had served Marcus dinner and ironed his shirts and cleaned his bathroom and accepted his cruelty as her due. Now I want him to know what it feels like, she said quietly. To have everything and lose it all. To be powerful and become powerless. To look in the mirror and see nothing looking back. William nodded slowly. Then that's what he'll get. There's something else you should know, Elena continued. Tonight before the wine incident, I overheard Marcus talking to his friend Gary. He said he's been planning to divorce me for months. He's waiting until after his company's IPO next month so he can protect his assets. He's got lawyers working to make sure I get nothing. Interesting. William pulled out his phone and typed something quickly. What else? He also said something about the IPO numbers. Something about adjustments that Gary was worried about. Marcus told him to relax, that the SEC would never look closely at a company that small. William's eyes sharpened. He told his friend he was manipulating the IPO numbers. In a room full of people. In a room full of drunk people. I don't think he knew anyone was listening. But you were listening. I was always listening. Elena smiled bitterly. That's the thing about being invisible. You hear everything. He used to take calls in front of me like I wasn't even there. Talked about business deals, investors. Things that I'm pretty sure weren't legal. He never worried about me repeating any of it, because he didn't think I was smart enough to understand. William stared at her for a long moment, then began to laugh. It was a genuine sound full of delight. "Oh, Elena, you magnificent girl. Do you have any idea what you just gave me? Information, weapons." William stood pacing with an energy that seemed too vibrant for his age. "The SEC doesn't investigate small tech companies," he said. "Well, they do when they receive an anonymous tip with detailed evidence of fraud. And they definitely do when that tip comes with documentation that Marcus Thornton has been manipulating his numbers to deceive investors." "I don't have documentation. I just heard him say it." "We don't need documentation. We just need them to look. And when they look, they'll find exactly what Marcus has been hiding. Men like him always leave trails. They're too arrogant to be careful." William's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and smiled. "Ah, perfect timing." "What is it?" "Richard Hayes just texted me. He's still at the party, keeping Marcus occupied. Apparently your husband is very confident that the deal is going to close tonight. He's been telling everyone that the unfortunate incident with his wife is behind him and that he's free to focus on the future. He's already pretending I don't exist. He's pretending you were never a threat. That's different." William offered his hand. "Come, I think it's time we correct that misunderstanding." Elena took his hand and stood. The dress moved around her like water. The sapphire weighed heavy and warm against her chest. The heels lifted her up, made her feel tall and formidable in a way she'd never felt before. "One more thing before we go," William said. "When we walk through those doors, people are going to be shocked. They're going to stare, whisper, maybe even try to touch you or talk to you. Don't acknowledge any of them. Keep your eyes forward, your chin up. You're not there to make friends or explain yourself. You're there to reclaim your power." "What about Marcus? What about him? Do I talk to him? Do I don't know, slap him? Throw a drink in his face?" William laughed. No, nothing so crude. When you're truly powerful, Elena, you don't need to make scenes. The scene makes itself." He tucked her hand into his elbow. "You're going to walk in there on my arm. You're going to let the room see exactly who you are. And then when Marcus comes crawling over to find out what's happening, you're going to tell him the truth. Which is that you own him. That everything he's worked for belongs to you now. That his deal is dead, his company is dead, and his marriage is over." William's eyes glittered. "And you're going to say it calmly, quietly, without raising your voice or shedding a single tear. Because that's how Kingsleys destroy their enemies. Not with screaming and drama, with cold, quiet, absolute devastation." They walked to the elevator, security falling in around them like a protective formation. Elena caught a glimpse of herself in the mirrored walls and still didn't recognize the woman looking back. Good, she thought. The old Elena was weak. The old Elena was prey. This new Elena, whoever she was becoming, was something else entirely. "Grandfather," she said as the elevator descended. "You mentioned that Richard Hayes works for you. What exactly does that mean?" "It means that the fund Marcus has been desperate to court is actually a subsidiary of Kingsley Holdings. Richard was there tonight on my orders evaluating whether Thornton Tech was worth acquiring. And now we're not acquiring it. We're destroying it." "How?" William smiled. "That deal Marcus wants so badly, the one that's going to save his company from bankruptcy, it's already dead. Richard is going to tell him tonight that the fund is pulling out. No explanation, no negotiation. Just a polite, 'We've decided to pursue other opportunities,' and a handshake. That will hurt him financially. That's just the beginning." The elevator opened and they stepped into the lobby. "I've already made calls. By tomorrow morning, every bank in Chicago will know that lending to Marcus Thornton is a mistake. Every investor will have received a quiet word that his numbers don't add up. Every partner will be reconsidering their position. Is that legal? It's business." William guided her toward the waiting cars. "And business, my dear, is just war conducted with lawyers instead of soldiers." They stepped outside into the rain. The convoy was waiting, engines idling exactly where they'd left it. But now, Elena didn't see a line of intimidating black vehicles. She saw an army. Her army. "Remember," William said as he helped her into the limousine. "You're not there for revenge. Revenge is emotional. This is justice. This is a correction. This is the universe putting things back in balance." Is there a difference? The difference is in your face. Revenge looks angry. Justice looks calm. He settled into the seat beside her. "Can you be calm, Elena? Can you look at the man who threw you in the gutter and show him nothing but ice?" Elena thought about it. She thought about 3 years of swallowed anger, 3 years of bitten tongues and lowered eyes and whispered apologies for existing. She thought about every time Marcus had made her feel small and every time she'd let him. "Yes," she said, "I can be ice." "Good." William tapped the partition and the car began to move. "Because in about 10 minutes, you're going to need it." The Peninsula Hotel grew larger in the window as they approached. Elena could see the lights of the ballroom, could imagine the people inside still drinking and laughing and celebrating Marcus's success. They had no idea what was coming. "One last thing," William said as the convoy pulled to a stop. "When this is over, when Marcus is ruined, and the divorce is final, and you've reclaimed your life, what do you want?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, what do you want to do with your freedom, with your fortune, with the second chance you're about to receive?" Elena hadn't thought that far ahead. For so long, survival had been her only goal. Getting through each day, enduring Marcus's cruelty, hoping that somehow, someday things would get better. But now, with unlimited possibilities stretching out before her, she didn't know what to do with them. "I want to help people like me," she said slowly, the words forming as she spoke them. "Kids in foster care, women in bad marriages, people who think they're alone, who think they're worthless, who've been told so many times that they're nothing that they've started to believe it." William's face softened. "Your father would be proud." "You think so? I know so. He was always too kind for his own good, too idealistic. He wanted to save the world one student at a time." William patted her hand. "You have his heart, Elena, but you have my ruthlessness. And that combination, kindness backed by power, is the most dangerous thing in the world." The car door opened. Security stepped out first, creating a corridor of dark suits. Then, William emerged, offering his hand back to Elena. She took it. She stepped out of the car, and she looked up at the Peninsula Hotel where 3 hours ago she had been bleeding on the sidewalk. "Ready?" William asked. Elena took a breath. The sapphire rose and fell on her chest. "Ready." They walked toward the doors, and the doors opened before them as if by magic. It was time to show Marcus Thornton exactly who he had thrown away. The lobby of the Peninsula Hotel fell silent as Elena walked through the doors. The concierge who had watched her get thrown out 3 hours ago dropped his pen. The doorman who had stood frozen while Marcus dragged her across the marble floor took an involuntary step backward. A woman in a fur coat stopped mid-sentence, her champagne glass frozen halfway to her lips. Elena didn't look at any of them. She kept her eyes forward, her chin lifted, her hand resting lightly on William's arm. The click of her crystal heels echoed through the sudden quiet like a countdown. William's security team flanked them, 4 men in dark suits, creating a moving barrier that forced people to step aside. They didn't push anyone. They didn't need to. The sheer weight of their presence parted the crowd like water before a ship's bow. "They're staring," Elena murmured, keeping her voice low. "Let them," William replied. "That's the point." They approached the ballroom doors. 2 hotel staff members scrambled to open them, nearly tripping over each other in their haste. The doors swung wide. 300 heads turned. The music didn't stop, not immediately. The string quartet continued playing for another few bars before the violinist noticed that no one was listening anymore. The notes trailed off into uncomfortable silence. Elena stood in the doorway, the light from the chandeliers catching the crystals on her dress, the sapphire blazing blue fire at her throat. She looked like a queen. She looked like a goddess. She looked like vengeance personified. And then the whispers started. Is that... It can't be. She was just... How did she... That's the Kingsley star. I'd recognize it anywhere. My grandmother used to talk about William Kingsley here, but he never attends public events. Elena scanned the room slowly, deliberately, letting everyone see that she was looking at them. She found Victoria first. Her mother-in-law stood near the bar, her face frozen in an expression of pure horror, her emerald silk dress suddenly looking cheap and gaudy compared to Elena's liquid silver. She found Serena Walsh next the senator's daughter, still in her red dress, her phone no longer raised. Serena's face had gone pale, her smirk replaced by something that looked almost like fear. And then she found Marcus. Her husband stood in the center of the room, a champagne glass in one hand, his other arm draped over the shoulder of an investor he'd been charming. He was laughing at something he hadn't noticed. The silence yet hadn't registered that the entire room had stopped to stare at the doorway. Then Gary, his best friend, grabbed his arm and pointed. Marcus turned. His laugh died in his throat. The champagne glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor, spraying expensive vintage across his Italian leather shoes. Elena. His voice cracked on her name. Elena didn't respond. She simply looked at him the way one might look at an insect that had wandered into a place it didn't belong. Richard Hayes materialized from the crowd, approaching William with a slight bow. Mr. Kingsley, I wasn't expecting you personally. Change of plans, Richard. William's voice carried across the silent room. I decided this situation required my direct attention. Of course, sir. Richard glanced at Elena with something that might have been respect. Ma'am. Marcus started pushing through the crowd, his face cycling through confusion, anger, and something that looked almost like panic. Elena, what the hell is going on? He reached for her arm, the same arm he'd bruised earlier, the same arm he'd used to drag her through this very room. Where did you get those clothes? Who is this man? What kind of game are you playing? William's security stepped forward, creating a wall between Marcus and Elena. Don't touch her. William's voice was quiet, but it cut through the air like a blade. You've done quite enough of that tonight. Who are you? Marcus demanded, puffing up his chest in that way he did when he felt threatened. This is my party. This is my wife. I don't know who you think you are, but I think, William interrupted calmly, that I'm William Kingsley. Perhaps you've heard the name. The color drained from Marcus's face. Everyone in the business world knew the name Kingsley. Everyone knew the legends, the hostile takeovers, the ruined competitors, the empire that spanned shipping and real estate and venture capital and a dozen other industries. William Kingsley was a myth, a monster, a boogeyman that executives used to scare each other at conferences. And he was standing in Marcus Thornton's birthday party with Marcus Thornton's wife on his arm. Mr. Kingsley! Marcus's voice had changed, completely obsequious now, desperate to please. I had no idea you'd be joining us. If I'd known, I would have sent a personal invitation. Please let me get you a drink. The champagne is excellent, and I have a private reserve of... I'm not here for champagne, Mr. Thornton. William guided Elena forward, and the crowd parted before them like the Red Sea. I'm here because you threw my granddaughter into the street like garbage. The word granddaughter hit the room like a bomb. The whispers exploded into full-volume chatter. People pulled out phones. Someone actually gasped out loud. Victoria Thornton made a sound like a strangled cat. Granddaughter? Marcus laughed, but it was a desperate, unhinged sound. That's impossible. Elena doesn't have any family. She's an orphan. She grew up in foster care. She has nothing. She is nothing. She is Elena Marie Kingsley. William cut in his voice, rising to fill the room. Daughter of my son Thomas and his wife Margaret, sole heir to the Kingsley estate, and as of 1 hour ago majority shareholder of the venture capital fund that you've been begging for money. Marcus's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. You look confused, Mr. Thornton. Allow me to clarify. William smiled, and it was the smile of a shark scenting blood. The deal you've been so desperate to close the investment that was going to save your company from bankruptcy, it was never real. Richard Hayes works for me. I sent him to evaluate whether you were worth acquiring. Tonight was supposed to be the final assessment. Supposed to be. Yes, I was going to buy your company, add it to my portfolio as a minor asset. I'd heard interesting things about your technology, and I thought there might be potential. William's smile disappeared. But then, I received a phone call from my granddaughter. She was bleeding on a sidewalk. She was crying in the rain. And she told me that her husband, the man she'd given 3 years of her life to, had thrown her out of his party, called her worthless, and left her in the gutter. The room was absolutely silent now. No one was even pretending not to listen. So I changed my mind, William continued. I'm not going to buy your company, Mr. Thornton. I'm going to destroy it. You can't do that. Marcus's voice came out as a whisper. You can't just— The deal was almost done. Richard said what I told him to say. William nodded toward his employee. Richard Hayes stepped forward, pulling a document from his jacket pocket. Mr. Thornton, I regret to inform you that Hamilton Holdings is withdrawing from the proposed investment agreement. After careful consideration, we've determined that your company does not meet our standards for fiscal responsibility or ethical leadership. Ethical leadership, Marcus sputtered. What does that even mean? It means we don't invest in men who beat their wives. Richard's voice was ice cold. The security footage from this hotel's lobby is quite illuminating. The way you dragged her across the floor, the way you pushed her down, the way you stood over her while she bled and called her garbage. He tucked the document back into his pocket. That footage is now in the hands of our legal department and several major news outlets. Marcus went white. You can't. That's private property. It's hotel property, and hotels are remarkably cooperative when a Kingsley asks for a favor. William turned to the crowd, raising his voice to address everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for interrupting your evening. Please continue enjoying the party. The champagne is excellent, I should know, since I own the vineyard it came from. A few nervous laughs rippled through the crowd. People shifted uncertainly, not sure if they were supposed to go back to mingling or keep watching the spectacle. Elena had been silent throughout the exchange, watching Marcus with an expression of cold detachment. But now she stepped forward, and the room fell silent again. Marcus. Her voice was steady, clear. Nothing like the trembling whisper he was used to hearing from her. I have something to say to you. Elena, baby, listen to me. Marcus held up his hands, his voice shifting into the pleading tone he used when he wanted something. This is all a misunderstanding. I was stressed. The pressure of the deal, your accident with Richard's jacket. I lost my temper. But you know I love you. We can work through this. Just tell your grandfather to back off and we can go home and talk about it like adults. Like adults? Elena tilted her head, slightly studying him like a specimen under a microscope. Is that what we were doing when you told Gary you couldn't wait to dump the stray dog? Is that what we were doing when you said I was pathetic and dependent and had nowhere else to go? Marcus's face flickered with surprise. He hadn't known she'd overheard that conversation. I didn't. That wasn't Gary misunderstood? I heard you, Marcus. I was standing right there behind the fern while you laughed about how you were going to divorce me after the IPO and leave me with nothing. While you complained about having to drag the charity case around. While you said I didn't have the spine to leave. Elena, you were right about one thing. Elena stepped closer to him, close enough that the security guards tensed but didn't intervene. I didn't have anywhere to go. I thought I had no one. I thought I was alone in the world and that I should be grateful for whatever scraps you threw me. She reached up and touched the sapphire at her throat. But I wasn't alone. I was never alone. I just didn't know it yet. Please. Marcus grabbed her hand, his grip desperate. I'll change. I'll be better. We can start over. Just don't do this. Don't ruin me. Elena looked down at his hand on hers, the same hand that had gripped her arm hard enough to bruise, the same hand that had shoved her onto the wet concrete. the same hand that had waved dismissively while she begged him not to leave her in the rain. "Let go of me," she said quietly. "Elena, let go." He released her hand like it had burned him. Elena reached into her crystal clutch and pulled out a folded document. She'd picked it up from Richard Hayes in the car, though Marcus didn't know that. "Do you know what this is?" She held it up so he could see. "This is the investment contract, the one you've been dreaming about for months. The one that was going to save your company and make you rich and prove to everyone that Marcus Thornton is a genius. Elena, please." She walked to the nearest table where a candle flickered in a crystal holder. The guests at the table scrambled backward, knocking over chairs in their haste to get out of the way. "Elena, don't." Marcus started forward, but William's security blocked him. "That contract is worth $50 million. You can't just—" Elena touched the corner of the paper to the candle flame. It caught instantly. Orange fire licked up the edge of the document, consuming the legal language, the signatures the future Marcus had been counting on. "No!" Marcus screamed, lunging forward. Two security guards grabbed him, holding him back as he struggled. "You crazy bitch! Do you know what you've done? That was my life. That was everything." Elena held the burning paper, watching it turn to ash. She didn't flinch, even when the flames crept close to her fingers. She just waited until the last possible moment, then dropped the burning remnants onto the marble floor and crushed them beneath her crystal heel. "Your life," she said softly. "That's what you called it. Your company, your money, your future." She looked at him, and her eyes were empty of everything except cold, quiet satisfaction. "Did you ever once, in 3 years of marriage, think of any of it as ours?" Marcus had no answer. "The deal is dead, Marcus." Elena brushed ash from her fingers. "And so is this marriage. I want a divorce." "Fine." Marcus spat, his fear turning to fury. "Fine. You want a divorce, I'll give you a divorce. And when my lawyers are done with you, you won't get a cent. I've been planning for this for months. Every asset is protected. Every account is in my name only. You'll walk away with nothing, just like you came in with nothing." "Actually," William spoke up, his voice almost gentle, "I don't think that's how this is going to go." He nodded to Richard, who produced another document. "What's that?" Marcus demanded. "This is a forensic analysis of your company's financial records," Richard explained. "It seems that someone has been making creative adjustments to the IPO projections, overstating revenue, understating debt, the kind of adjustments that the SEC takes very seriously." Marcus went pale. "How did you? Who told you?" "It doesn't matter how we know." William took the document from Richard and held it up. "What matters is that we have proof, and we have witnesses. Your friend Gary has been very cooperative once we explained the legal consequences of conspiracy to commit securities fraud." "Gary talked to you?" Marcus looked around wildly, but Gary was nowhere to be seen. "That backstabbing, I'll kill him." "You'll do nothing." William's voice hardened. "Because here's what's going to happen, Mr. Thornton. You're going to sign the divorce papers that my lawyers will deliver to you tomorrow morning. You're going to agree to a clean split, no alimony, no asset claims, no attempt to take a single dollar from my granddaughter. In exchange, we won't turn this evidence over to the SEC. And if I refuse, then you go to prison for securities fraud, 5 to 10 years, depending on how the judge feels about men who beat their wives." William smiled. "Your choice." Marcus looked around the room, searching for allies, for sympathy, for anyone who might help him. But the faces that stared back were cold and closed. These were business people. They knew which way the wind was blowing, and they weren't about to get caught on the wrong side of William Kingsley. Even Victoria had retreated into the crowd, trying to make herself invisible. Even Serena Walsh had disappeared entirely. He was alone. "You planned this." Marcus said, his voice hollow. "This whole thing. You set me up." "No." Elena shook her head. "I didn't know any of this until 3 hours ago. 3 hours ago I was bleeding on a sidewalk because my husband threw me out like trash. Everything that's happening now, you brought it on yourself. I was good to you. The words came out desperate, almost pleading. I gave you a home. I gave you clothes. I gave you a life. You were nobody before me. You were nothing. I was someone who deserved better. Elena's voice was steady. I was someone who deserved to be loved, not tolerated. I was someone who deserved to be cherished, not mocked behind my back. I was someone, Marcus. I was always someone. You just couldn't see it because you were too busy looking down at me. She turned her back on him, a deliberate gesture, a final dismissal. Grandfather, she said, I think I'd like to go home now. Of course, my dear. William offered his arm. I believe we're done here. They started toward the door, security falling in around them. The crowd parted once again, but this time the faces they passed were different. Some people looked ashamed, perhaps remembering how they'd laughed, how they'd watched, how they'd done nothing. Others looked calculating, already figuring out how to position themselves in the new reality. A few, though, looked at Elena with something like respect, like admiration, like they were seeing her for the first time. Elena! Marcus's voice rang out behind them. This isn't over. You hear me? This isn't over. Elena didn't turn around. She didn't acknowledge him at all. She just kept walking, her head high, her step steady, her hand resting lightly on her grandfather's arm. The doors swung open before them. They walked through, leaving behind the ballroom, the party, the champagne, and the man who had thought he could throw her away without consequences. As they crossed the lobby, one of the security guards muttered something to another. Elena caught only the words, "Handled that well." William heard it too. He patted Elena's hand. You did more than handle it, he said quietly. You conquered it. I don't feel like a conqueror. Elena's voice was suddenly tired. The adrenaline was fading, and beneath it she could feel the exhaustion, the grief, the lingering shock of everything that had happened. I feel like I just burned down my own life. You burned down a prison, William corrected. There's a difference. They stepped outside. The rain had stopped, and the Chicago night had turned cold and clear. The limousine was waiting, engine running, doors already open. What happens now? Elena asked as they approached the car. Now. William helped her inside. Now Marcus Thornton begins to understand what it means to be on the wrong side of a Kingsley. The banks I called will start refusing his loans tomorrow. The investors I spoke with will pull out by the end of the week. His company will be bankrupt within a month. And after that, the SEC investigation begins. Gary's testimony, combined with our financial analysis, will be more than enough to destroy him in court. He'll be lucky to avoid prison time. Elena leaned back against the leather seat, watching the hotel recede through the window. Somewhere inside, Marcus was probably screaming at whoever would listen. Somewhere inside, Victoria was probably trying to figure out how to salvage her social position. Somewhere inside, 300 people were probably gossiping about what they'd just witnessed. But Elena was out here, free, moving forward instead of standing still. I burned the contract, she said suddenly. The real one. Is there going to be a problem with that? William laughed. My dear girl, that contract wasn't worth the paper it was printed on. It was a copy we created specifically for tonight. The real documents are safely filed away in my lawyer's offices. Richard never had any intention of actually investing in Marcus's company. So the whole thing was theater. William smiled. But good theater, don't you think? Elena thought about Marcus's face when the paper caught fire. The screaming, the desperate lunging, the complete and total collapse of his composure. Yes, she said quietly. Good theater. The limousine pulled away from the hotel, carrying them into the Chicago night. Behind them, in the golden glow of the Peninsula Ballroom, a man who had once thought himself invincible was just beginning to understand how wrong he had been. And Elena Kingsley no longer. Elena Thornton, never again. Elena Thornton closed her eyes and let herself breathe for the first time in 3 years. The morning sun cut through the windows of William's penthouse like a blade, and Elena woke to the unfamiliar sensation of silk sheets and absolute silence. No Marcus demanding his coffee. No Victoria calling to criticize her breakfast choices. No alarm set for 5 a.m. so she could have the apartment spotless before her husband woke up. Just silence. Peace. Freedom. She lay there for a long moment, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince herself that last night had actually happened. The party. The humiliation. The transformation. The burning contract and Marcus's screaming face. It felt like a dream. But the sapphire necklace on the nightstand was real. The crystal dress hanging in the closet was real. The bandage on her knee, now only slightly sore, was very real. Her phone buzzed, then buzzed again, then started buzzing continuously, notification after notification flooding in. Elena reached for it and saw 247 unread messages, 89 missed calls. Her social media accounts dormant for years because Marcus said they were embarrassing had exploded overnight. She opened one news alert at random. Tech CEO publicly humiliates wife at birthday gala. Then her billionaire grandfather arrives. The article included photos. Elena in the silver dress, the sapphire blazing at her throat. William with his protective hand on her arm. Marcus on his knees, reaching toward the burning contract. And one photo that made her stomach turn, a grainy security camera shot of her lying on the wet sidewalk, blood on her knee. Marcus standing over her with contempt on his face. Someone knocked on the bedroom door. Elena. William's voice gentle but alert. Are you awake? Yes, come in. Her grandfather entered carrying a tablet and a cup of coffee. He was already dressed in a suit, looking as sharp and formidable as he had the night before. I thought you might need caffeine, he said, handing her the cup. And a briefing. A briefing. Things have been happening while you slept. William sat on the edge of the bed, scrolling through his tablet. Marcus gave an interview this morning. A morning show. He's trying to control the narrative. Elena felt her chest tighten. What did he say? Would you like to watch it? No. She paused. Yes. I need to know. William turned the tablet toward her and pressed play. Marcus appeared on screen, sitting opposite a sympathetic-looking host. He was wearing a suit that probably cost $5,000, but his face looked haggard. Dark circles under his eyes. A slight tremor in his hands that the camera couldn't quite hide. I'm devastated, Marcus was saying, his voice cracking with practiced emotion. I thought I knew my wife. I thought we had a real marriage. But it turns out she was lying to me from the very beginning. Lying how? The host asked. She told me she was an orphan. She said she had nothing, no family, no money. I fell in love with her simplicity, her authenticity. I wanted to take care of her, give her the life she deserved. Marcus dabbed at his eyes with a handkerchief. And the whole time she was secretly the heir to a billion-dollar fortune. She was testing me, playing games, making a fool of me in front of everyone. So you're saying this was some kind of elaborate setup? Exactly. Marcus leaned forward, his expression earnest. She wanted to see if I would love her when she was poor. It was a test. And when I failed, when I got stressed and said some things I didn't mean, she brought her grandfather in to destroy me. This isn't justice. This is entrapment. Elena felt rage building in her chest, hot and bright. He's lying, she said quietly. Every word. I didn't know about any of this until last night. I wasn't testing him. I genuinely thought I was alone. I know. William took the tablet back. But the court of public opinion doesn't know that. Marcus is smart, he's playing the victim. Poor tech CEO deceived by scheming billionaire heiress. It's a compelling story. How do I fight it? You don't. William set the tablet aside. Not directly. The more you engage with his narrative, the more credibility you give it. Instead, we let the facts speak for themselves. What facts? William smiled. The facts that are about to become very public. He pulled out his phone. I received a call this morning from a journalist at the Chicago Tribune. It seems that someone I couldn't possibly imagine who leaked the security footage from the Peninsula Hotel lobby. The footage of Marcus throwing me out. All of it. The dragging, the pushing, the way he stood over you while you bled and called you garbage. It's already going viral. William showed her the screen. Current view count 4 million and climbing. Elena watched the video play. Seeing it from the outside was strange. She barely recognized the woman in the navy dress, the one who looked so small and frightened, who reached up toward her husband with desperate hope, only to be sneered at and abandoned. That woman felt like a stranger now, a ghost from a past life. There's more. William continued. Gary Walsh, Marcus's friend, the one who helped him plan the divorce, has decided to cooperate fully with our attorneys. In exchange for immunity from prosecution, he's providing detailed testimony about Marcus's financial fraud. Gary turned on him. Gary is a coward. Cowards always choose self-preservation. William stood up, straightening his jacket. Marcus's banks are already calling in his loans. His investors are pulling out. His company's stock, what little of it is publicly traded, dropped 40% in pre-market trading. Elena absorbed this information slowly. 24 hours ago, Marcus had been on top of the world, successful, wealthy, surrounded by admirers. Now, his empire was crumbling around him. She should have felt triumphant. Instead, she just felt tired. What happens next? She asked. Next, you get dressed and come downstairs. Victoria Thornton is in the lobby. She's demanding to see you. Elena's jaw tightened. I don't want to see her. I know, but I think you should. William walked to the door. She's scared, Elena. People say interesting things when they're scared. And I suspect Victoria knows secrets about her son that could be very useful to us. Elena looked at the tablet where Marcus's interview was still paused on his tear-stained face. Fine, she said. Give me 20 minutes. Victoria Thornton looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her designer clothes were wrinkled. Her perfectly maintained hair was escaping its pins. Her makeup, usually flawless, had been applied with shaking hands. One eyebrow was noticeably higher than the other. She stood up when Elena entered the penthouse living room, her hands twisting together in front of her. Elena, Victoria's voice cracked. Thank you for seeing me. I know I don't deserve... You're right. Elena sat down on the opposite sofa, maintaining distance. You don't. Say what you came to say. Victoria flinched at the coldness in Elena's voice. This was not the meek daughter-in-law she was used to bullying. I came to apologize, Victoria began. What Marcus did last night was unconscionable. I never should have supported him. I never should have said those things about you in front of everyone. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. Elena said nothing. She just waited. Please, Victoria continued, her voice rising with desperation. You have to help us. The banks are calling in Marcus's loans. They're threatening to take the house, my house. I'll have nothing. I'll be out on the street. Like you left me on the street? That was different. How? Elena leaned forward. How was it different, Victoria? When I was bleeding on that sidewalk, did you try to help me? Did you ask Marcus to stop? Or did you stand there in your emerald silk and tell everyone I was drunk? Victoria's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. For 3 years. Elena continued, her voice steady. You made my life hell. You told me I wasn't good enough. You told me I was embarrassing. You told everyone I was the maid's daughter, so you wouldn't have to admit your son married a foster kid. You made me feel like I was worthless, like I should be grateful for every scrap of attention, like I was lucky to be tolerated. I didn't mean... You meant every word. Elena stood up. And now you're here begging for mercy because you're about to lose your house. Not because you're sorry, not because you've changed, because you're scared. Victoria started crying. Real tears, not the theatrical kind she usually produced for sympathy. These were ugly, desperate tears, the tears of someone who had finally realized they were powerless. "Please," Victoria whispered. "I have nowhere else to go. Marcus won't help me. He's too busy trying to save himself. My friends won't return my calls. I'm alone. I'm completely alone." Elena felt something shift in her chest. Not forgiveness that would take years if it ever came at all, but something like recognition. She knew what it felt like to be alone. She knew what it felt like to have nowhere to turn. "I'm not going to help you," Elena said quietly. "Not the way you want. I'm not going to call off the lawyers, or forgive Marcus, or pretend like the last 3 years didn't happen." Victoria's face crumpled. "But," Elena continued, "I'm not going to destroy you either. You're not my enemy, Victoria. You're just a sad, scared woman who chose the wrong side." "Then what do I do?" "You start over. The same way I'm starting over." Elena walked to the door. "Sell your jewelry, get a smaller apartment, learn to cook your own meals and iron your own clothes. It's not as hard as you think." "I can't." "You can. You just don't want to." Elena paused at the door. "And Victoria, if you ever speak to the press about me, if you ever try to spin this story in Marcus's favor, if you ever do anything to hurt me again, I will destroy you. Completely." Without hesitation. "Do you understand?" Victoria nodded, her face pale. "Good. Giles will show you out." Elena left the room without looking back. The divorce proceedings began 3 days later. Marcus, stripped of his bravado and his money, and his powerful friends arrived at the law firm's conference room, looking like a ghost of himself. His suit was the same one he'd worn to the party, probably the only designer suit he still owned. His lawyer was a young associate from a mid-tier firm, clearly outmatched by the army of attorneys William had assembled. Elena sat across the table from him, flanked by lawyers and security. She wore a simple black dress, elegant but understated. She wasn't trying to impress anyone today. "Let's begin," William's lead attorney said, opening a folder thick with documents. "Mr. Thornton, you've had 3 days to review our settlement proposal. What is your response?" Marcus's lawyer cleared his throat nervously. "My client believes the terms are excessive. He's willing to agree to a divorce, but he maintains that he's entitled to a portion of the marital assets given that what?" The attorney cut him off. "Given that your client committed securities fraud. Given that he physically assaulted his wife in front of 300 witnesses. Given that video evidence of that assault has now been viewed by 15 million people. The assault allegation is exaggerated. We have medical records." The attorney slid a document across the table. "Emergency room visit night of the incident. Lacerations to the knee, requiring 4 stitches. Contusions on the upper arm, consistent with grip marks. A formal diagnosis of injuries sustained from being pushed onto concrete." Marcus's face went red. "She fell. She was clumsy. I didn't." "You pushed her." Elena spoke for the first time, and the room went silent. "You grabbed my arm, dragged me through the lobby, and shoved me onto the ground. Don't sit there and pretend it was an accident. Don't pretend I fell. You pushed me, Marcus. Own it." Marcus stared at her. Something in his expression shifted, the mask of victimhood slipping to reveal the rage beneath. "You want me to own it? Fine. I pushed you. You were embarrassing me in front of the most important investors of my career, and I snapped. Is that what you want to hear?" "Marcus," his lawyer started. "No!" Marcus held up a hand. "She wants honesty. I'll give her honesty." He leaned forward, his eyes locked on Elena. "Yes, I pushed you. Yes, I said terrible things. Yes, I was planning to divorce you. But you know what I earned the right to be angry. Do you have any idea what it's like being married to a ghost? You never had opinions. You never had personality. You just floated around our apartment like a sad little shadow, agreeing with everything I said, never pushing back, never fighting for anything." "Because you crushed every opinion I ever had," Elena replied calmly. "Because every time I disagreed with you, you called me stupid. Every time I suggested something, you shot it down. Every time I tried to be myself, you told me that wasn't good enough. You didn't want a wife, Marcus. You wanted a decoration. And when the decoration didn't sparkle the way you wanted, you threw it in the trash. I gave you everything. You gave me nothing. Elena's voice was still steady, but there was steel beneath it now. You gave me a prison. A beautiful, expensive prison, where I had to ask permission to buy groceries and apologize for taking up space. That's not a marriage. That's not love. That's ownership. Marcus slammed his hand on the table. His lawyer flinched. You want to talk about ownership? Fine. Let's talk about how you own my company now. Let's talk about how your grandfather bought up my debt and is using it to destroy everything I built. Let's talk about how I'm going to lose my house, my cars, my reputation, everything, because you couldn't handle a little criticism. A little criticism? Elena laughed, and it was not a kind sound. You called me garbage. You said I was pathetic. You left me bleeding in the rain while you went back to dance with your mistress. She wasn't. Don't lie to me, Marcus. Not now. Not after everything. Elena pulled out her phone and placed it on the table. I have text messages, emails, hotel receipts. I know about Serena Walsh. I know about the apartment you rented for her downtown. I know about the engagement ring you bought 3 weeks ago. Marcus went pale. You were planning to propose to her. After the divorce was final. After you'd thrown me out with nothing. Elena's voice was quiet now, almost gentle. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Did you think I was that stupid? Elena. Don't. She held up her hand. I don't want your excuses. I don't want your explanations. I just want this to be over. She turned to the lead attorney. What are the terms? Clean split. No alimony to either party. Mr. Thornton signs over any claim to assets acquired during the marriage. In exchange, we don't pursue criminal charges for assault, and we don't turn over the financial evidence to the SEC. No. Marcus shook his head. Absolutely not. That's admitting guilt. That's saying I did something wrong. You did do something wrong, his lawyer said wearily. Multiple things. And frankly, Mr. Thornton, this is the best deal you're going to get. If this goes to court, if the SEC gets involved, you're looking at prison time. Real prison. Not some country club facility. Federal prison for securities fraud. Marcus looked around the room, searching for an ally, for an escape, for some way out of the trap he'd built for himself. He found nothing. Fine, he said, finally his voice hollow. I'll sign. The attorney slid the divorce papers across the table. 50 pages of legal language, all of it designed to sever the bond between Elena Marsh and Marcus Thornton completely and permanently. Marcus picked up the pen. His hand was shaking. You know, he said quietly, not looking at Elena. I did love you once, in the beginning, before everything got complicated. I know. Elena's voice was soft. I loved you too. That's what makes this so sad. Marcus signed his name, page after page after page. His signature grew shakier as he went, until by the end it was barely legible. When he finished, he sat back in his chair looking deflated. Empty, like someone had reached inside him and scooped out everything that made him Marcus Thornton. It's done, the attorney said, gathering the papers. The marriage is dissolved. Elena stood up. She looked at Marcus, really looked at him for what she knew would be the last time. Goodbye, Marcus, she said. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. She walked out of the conference room without waiting for a response. In the hallway, William was waiting. He fell into step beside her as she walked toward the elevator. How do you feel? He asked. Elena thought about it. She expected to feel triumphant or relieved, or maybe even sad. Instead, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Light. She felt light. Free, she said finally. I feel free. William smiled and patted her hand. Good. Because we're not quite done yet. What do you mean? I mean Marcus signed the divorce papers. But there's still the matter of his company, his debts, and the small issue of making sure he can never hurt anyone else the way he hurt you. The elevator doors opened. They stepped inside. What are you planning? Elena asked. Nothing dramatic. William pressed the button for the lobby. Just a few more phone calls. A few more pieces moving into place. By this time next week, Marcus Thornton won't just be divorced. He'll be unemployable, bankrupt, and completely alone. Is that really necessary? He's already lost everything. William turned to look at her, his expression serious. Do you know what men like Marcus do when they're cornered? They find new victims. They rebuild. They convince some other vulnerable woman that they've changed, that they've learned their lesson, that this time will be different. And then they do it all over again. The elevator stopped. The doors opened onto the lobby. I'm not destroying Marcus out of revenge, William continued. I'm destroying him so that no one else has to go through what you went through. That's not cruelty, Elena. That's justice. Elena thought about that as they walked toward the waiting car. She thought about the woman she'd been 3 years ago, hopeful, trusting, desperate for love. She thought about all the women who might meet Marcus in the future, who might fall for his charm, who might not have a billionaire grandfather to rescue them. Okay, she said quietly. Do what you need to do. William nodded. I will. But first we have one more stop. Where? The Tribune building. There's a journalist who wants to interview you. She's writing a feature about domestic abuse among the wealthy, how money and status can trap women in bad marriages. She thinks your story could help other people. Elena hesitated. I don't know if I'm ready to talk about it publicly. You don't have to be ready. William opened the car door for her. But think about what you said last night about wanting to help people like you. Women in bad marriages, people who think they're alone. Elena remembered saying that. It felt like a lifetime ago. Your story has power, Elena, William said gently. The power to show other women that they're not alone, that they can survive, that there's life on the other side of the pain. Elena looked at the Tribune building rising in the distance. She thought about all the women who might be watching Marcus's interview right now, believing his version of events, feeling sorry for him, instead of recognizing him for what he was. Okay, she said, sliding into the car. Let's go tell my story. The car pulled away from the curb, carrying Elena toward the next chapter of her new life. Behind her, in a conference room on the 40th floor, Marcus Thornton sat alone at the table where his marriage had just ended. His lawyer had left. The Kingsley attorneys had left. Everyone had left. He stared at the empty space where the divorce papers had been, trying to understand how everything had gone so wrong, so fast. 3 days ago, he had been on top of the world. Now, he had nothing. His phone buzzed. A text from Serena Walsh. Don't contact me again. My father says you're toxic. The engagement is off. Marcus read the message twice, then threw his phone against the wall. It shattered into pieces, falling to the floor like broken promises. He sat there for a long time, surrounded by the wreckage of his life, wondering how the woman he'd thrown away had become the one holding all the power. 1 year later, the Chicago winter had returned with a vengeance. Snow swirled through the streets like confetti made of ice, and the wind cut through even the warmest coats. Outside the entrance of Alinea, one of the city's most exclusive restaurants, a line of luxury cars idled in the valet lane, their engines humming against the cold. A man in a valet uniform jogged between the vehicles, his breath forming clouds in the frozen air. His name tag, crooked and plastic, read simply, Marcus. Marcus Thornton had lost 40 pounds in the past year, not from dieting or exercise, from stress. The sleepless nights, the constant anxiety, the slow grinding humiliation of watching his entire life collapse piece by piece. First, the company had gone. Thornton Tech, his baby. The empire he'd spent a decade building, bankrupt within 6 weeks of the divorce. The SEC investigation had been swift and brutal. Gary's testimony, combined with the financial records Williams' team had compiled, painted a picture of systematic fraud that even the most sympathetic judge couldn't ignore. Then the house had gone. The cars. The art collection. The wine cellar he'd been so proud of. Everything liquidated to pay off creditors, lawyers' fines. By the end, Marcus was left with a suitcase of clothes and a checking account balance of $847.32. His mother had fared only slightly better. Victoria now lived in a two-bedroom apartment in Schaumburg, spending her days watching reality television and calling Marcus to complain about her neighbors. She'd sold all her jewelry except for her wedding ring, which she clung to as proof that she had once been somebody. Serena Walsh had disappeared completely. Her father's resignation from the Senate had been followed by a quiet retreat to their family estate in Virginia. She'd blocked Marcus's number, his email, his social media accounts. He'd seen photos of her on Instagram. She was engaged to a venture capitalist from San Francisco, now wearing a ring twice the size of the one Marcus had bought for her. And so here he was. Marcus Thornton, former CEO, former millionaire, former somebody parking cars for tips outside restaurants he used to own. "Hey buddy, wake up." A young man in an expensive coat was snapping his fingers in Marcus's face. "I've been standing here for 30 seconds. Are you going to take my keys or what?" "Sorry, sir." Marcus kept his head down, avoiding eye contact. He'd learned to do that. Looking people in the face meant risking recognition. The viral video of him throwing Elena out had never fully died down. Every few weeks, someone would recognize him, and the whispers would start again. "That's the guy who—" Can you believe he serves him right? What happened to Marcus took the keys and jogged to the car, a Porsche 911, the same model he'd once owned in black. The leather seats were warm. The engine purred like a satisfied cat. He drove it carefully around the corner and parked it in the VIP lot, then walked back to his station, rubbing his hands together for warmth. Tonight was a big event at Alinea. Some charity gala, the other valets had said. Major donors, celebrities. The kind of crowd Marcus used to belong to. The kind of crowd that wouldn't even see him now. By 10 o'clock, the guests had started filtering out. Marcus ran back and forth between the lot and the entrance, fetching Mercedes and Bentleys and Range Rovers, opening doors, and accepting tips with muttered thanks. His knees ached. His back hurt. His fingers were so cold he could barely feel them. But he kept moving, because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering, and remembering meant facing the truth of how far he'd fallen. "Marcus!" The manager's voice cut through the cold. "Get over here, VIP exit. They want the Phantom brought around. Now!" Marcus sprinted to the VIP lot. The Rolls-Royce Phantom sat in the corner space reserved for the most important guests of the evening. It was a beast of a machine. Custom black paint, diplomatic flags on the fenders, probably worth more than Marcus had made in his entire life. He slid into the driver's seat, inhaling the scent of leather and money, and everything he'd lost. For a moment he just sat there, gripping the steering wheel, trying to remember what it felt like to own something this beautiful. Then he drove around to the entrance and pulled up to the curb. He jumped out and hurried to open the rear passenger door, executing the bow he'd been trained to do. Eyes down, shoulders bent. The posture of service. "Your car, ma'am." A pair of feet stepped out onto the sidewalk. They weren't stilettos, just elegant flat velvet boots. Sensible for the weather. Tasteful. "Thank you." The voice hit him like a physical blow. Marcus froze, his hand still on the door handle. He knew that voice. He'd heard it every day for 3 years. He'd heard it begging him to stop. He'd heard it crying in the rain. But he'd never heard it sound like this, calm, confident, completely at peace. He looked up. Elena stood before him, wrapped in a camel-colored coat that probably cost more than his monthly rent. Her hair was pulled back loosely, and she wore minimal makeup. She looked healthy, happy, radiant in a way he'd never seen during their marriage. In her arms, she held a sleeping toddler, a little girl with curly dark hair and chubby cheeks wrapped in a pink blanket. The child couldn't have been more than a year old, and standing beside Elena, one protective hand on her back, was a man. Tall, broad-shouldered, kind face. He wore a simple dark suit, no flashy watch or designer label, but he carried himself with quiet confidence. Marcus recognized him from the society pages. Dr. Nathan Cole, one of the top pediatric cardiologists in the country. The man Elena had married 6 months ago in a private ceremony that Marcus had only learned about through a tabloid headline. Elena looked at Marcus. Her eyes traveled over the valet uniform, the chapped hands, the name tag that hung slightly crooked on his chest. Elena. Her name came out as a croak, barely audible over the wind. You look... He didn't know how to finish the sentence. She looked beautiful. She looked successful. She looked like everything he'd thrown away. Hello, Marcus. Her voice was neutral, not cold, not warm. Just... nothing. Like he was a stranger she was being polite to. Is this... Marcus's eyes went to the baby, then to the man beside her. Is this your... My daughter, yes. Lily. Elena shifted the sleeping child slightly. And this is my husband, Nathan. Nathan looked at Marcus with mild curiosity. Should I know you? The question was genuine. There was no recognition in his eyes, no awareness of the history between Marcus and his wife. Elena hadn't told him. Or if she had, she'd done it without pictures, without names, without any detail that would let Nathan identify the man standing before them. Marcus realized with a sick twist in his gut that he had become a footnote in Elena's story. An unnamed chapter from her past, someone not even worth remembering clearly. No, Elena said before Marcus could answer. You don't know him. He's just someone from a long time ago. Just someone. The words echoed in Marcus's head. Just someone. Like he was nobody. Like he was nothing. Like she had been, according to him, on that rainy night a lifetime ago. Honey, we should get Lily into the car, Nathan said gently. It's too cold for her out here. You're right. Elena smiled at her husband, a real smile, the kind Marcus had never seen on her face during their marriage. Let's go. She turned toward the car, dismissing Marcus without another glance. Elena, wait. She paused, didn't turn around, just waited. I'm sorry. The words tumbled out before Marcus could stop them. I know it doesn't mean anything now. I know I can't undo what I did, but I'm sorry. For all of it. For how I treated you. For what I said. For everything. Elena was quiet for a long moment. The snow continued to fall around them. The baby stirred in her arms, then settled back into sleep. Finally she turned, not all the way, just enough to look at him over her shoulder. I believe you, she said. I believe you're sorry. But I want you to understand something, Marcus. I'm not standing here as your victim. I'm not standing here waiting for your apology to make me whole. I know. I'm standing here as someone who survived you, who rebuilt everything you tried to destroy, who found love, real love, the kind that doesn't come with conditions or cruelty. She looked at Nathan, at the baby, at the life she'd created from the ashes. You didn't break me, Marcus. You just delayed me. Marcus felt tears prick at his eyes. The cold wind made them sting. Is there anything I can do? He asked. Anything that would... Would what? Make up for 3 years of abuse? Make up for leaving me bleeding on a sidewalk? Elena shook her head slowly. No, Marcus. There's nothing you can do for me. The only thing you can do now is become someone better. Not for my sake, for your own. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a business card. Simple, elegant, just a name and a phone number. This is my foundation, she said, holding it out to him. We help people who've been through domestic abuse, counseling, job training, housing assistance. She paused. We also work with abusers who want to change, who want to understand why they did what they did and make sure they never do it again. Marcus took the card with numb fingers. "I'm not offering you forgiveness," Elena said. "That's not mine to give anymore. But I'm offering you a chance to become someone who doesn't hurt the people who love him." She turned back to the car, and Nathan opened the door for her. She slid inside, settling the baby on her lap. "Good luck, Marcus," she said. "I mean that. I genuinely hope you find whatever it is you need to become whole." Nathan reached into his wallet and pulled out a folded bill. He pressed it into Marcus's hand. "Drive safe tonight," Nathan said, and there was no cruelty in his voice, no judgment, just kindness. The simple kindness of a good man to a stranger in the cold. The door closed. The window hummed as it rolled up. Through the tinted glass, Marcus could see Elena leaning her head against her husband's shoulder. He could see Nathan press a kiss to her hair. He could see the baby stirring, reaching up toward her mother's face. A family, a real family, built on love instead of control. The Rolls-Royce pulled away from the curb, its taillights glowing red against the swirling snow. Marcus stood there watching it go. He watched until the car turned the corner, until the taillights disappeared, until he was alone on the sidewalk with nothing but the wind and the snow and the business card in his hand. He looked down at the bill Nathan had given him. $100. More money than Marcus used to give Elena for her weekly grocery budget. The irony wasn't lost on him. "Hey, Marcus." The manager's voice again, sharp and impatient. "Stop daydreaming. There's a line forming. Move it." Marcus stuffed the money in his pocket next to the business card. He'd think about both of them later. Right now he had cars to park, tips to earn, a life to survive. He jogged back to the entrance, his breath crystallizing in the frozen air. Behind him, somewhere in the darkness of the Chicago night, Elena Kingsley held her daughter close and smiled at her husband and didn't look back. She never looked back. 3 months after that night, William Kingsley passed away peacefully in his sleep. He was 79 years old, and he died the way he'd lived, on his own terms, in his own home, surrounded by the family he'd spent 20 years trying to rebuild. Elena was at his bedside when he took his last breath. She held his hand and told him she loved him and thanked him for finding her when she thought she was lost forever. The funeral was private, only family and close friends. No press, no cameras, no spectacle. William's will left everything to Elena, the company, the properties, the investments, all of it. $12 billion transferred in a single moment from one generation to the next. But the money wasn't what mattered to Elena. What mattered was the letter William had left with his attorney to be delivered after his death. "My dearest Elena," it began. "If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you're probably wondering what to do next. Let me tell you what I learned in 79 years of life. The money means nothing. The power means nothing. The empire means nothing. What matters is how you use it. You told me once that you wanted to help people like you, children in foster care, women in bad marriages, people who think they're alone. Do that. Build something that matters. Leave the world better than you found it. And remember, you were never nothing. You were always everything. The only difference now is that you know it. I love you, granddaughter. I'm proud of you. And wherever I am, I'm watching you shine." Your grandfather, William. Elena read the letter 3 times. Then she folded it carefully and placed it in a frame on her desk where she could see it every day. And she got to work. The Kingsley Foundation launched 6 months later. It was the largest private charity in Chicago, funded by an endowment of $500 million. Its mission was simple: help people who had no one. Foster children received scholarships, mentorship, and housing support. Domestic abuse survivors received counseling, legal aid, and job training. Women fleeing bad marriages received emergency funds and safe housing. And the message Elena wished someone had given her years ago: you are not alone. You matter. There is life on the other side. Elena ran the foundation herself. Not from a distance, not through intermediaries, but personally. She met with survivors. She visited shelters. She testified before Congress about the hidden epidemic of domestic abuse among the wealthy. She told her story over and over to anyone who would listen. "I was nobody," she would say in her speeches. "At least that's what I believed. My husband told me I was worthless. My mother-in-law told me I was an embarrassment. I spent 3 years believing that I didn't matter, that I deserved the treatment I received, that I should be grateful for whatever scraps of affection came my way." She would pause then, letting the silence stretch. "But I was wrong. And if you're sitting there right now believing the same lies I believe, that you're worthless, that you deserve to be hurt, that you have nowhere to go, I need you to hear this. You are not nothing. You never were. The people who told you that were wrong. And there is a way out." The speeches went viral. The Foundation's hotline received thousands of calls. Women who had never told anyone about their abuse found the courage to speak. Men who had hurt their partners found the courage to seek help. And Elena kept going, kept building, kept helping. Because that was who she was now. Not the scared girl who flinched at loud noises, not the meek wife who apologized for existing, but someone who had walked through fire and emerged on the other side, determined to light the way for others. On Lily's second birthday, Elena stood on the balcony of her Chicago penthouse, watching the sun set over the lake. Nathan came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. Lily was inside, giggling as the nanny blew bubbles for her. "What are you thinking about?" Nathan asked. Elena leaned back into his embrace. "I was thinking about how different my life is now. How different I am." "Good different. Very good different." She turned in his arms, looking up at his face. This man who loved her without conditions, who supported her without controlling her, who saw her, really saw her, and chose her anyway. "I used to think I'd never be happy. That happiness was for other people, better people. And now I know that happiness isn't something you find. It's something you build, day by day, choice by choice." She smiled. "I'm building something beautiful, Nathan. With you, with Lily, with the Foundation, with my whole life." He kissed her forehead. "William would be proud." "I know." Elena looked out at the city, her city now in a way. The place where she'd fallen and risen. The place where she'd lost everything and gained something better. "I think he is proud. Wherever he is." They stood there together as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Somewhere in the city, Marcus Thornton was finishing his shift at the valet stand. He'd started going to the counseling program Elena's foundation offered. He was working with a therapist, trying to understand the patterns of control and cruelty that had defined his relationships. He wasn't the same man who'd thrown his wife into the rain. He wasn't sure who he was becoming, but he was trying. Somewhere in the suburbs, Victoria Thornton was learning to cook her own meals and wash her own clothes. She'd started volunteering at a local church, not because she'd found religion, but because she'd found loneliness, and helping others was better than drowning in it. She still complained constantly, still blamed everyone but herself for her misfortune. But there were moments, small moments, when she glimpsed the role she'd played in her own downfall. Somewhere in Virginia, Serena Walsh was planning her wedding to a man she didn't love because love had become too risky. She'd learned watching Marcus's destruction that the men who seemed most powerful were often the most fragile. She'd decided it was better to marry for stability than passion. She'd decided it was safer to feel nothing than to feel too much. But Elena didn't think about any of them. Not anymore. She thought about Lily growing up knowing she was loved unconditionally. She thought about Nathan, who proved every day that good men existed. She thought about the thousands of women her foundation had helped, each one a story of survival. Each one proof that no one was beyond saving. She thought about the girl she used to be, the scared, hopeless girl who sat on a rainy sidewalk and believed she was worthless. "That girl is gone now," Elena whispered to herself. And she was. In her place stood a woman who had learned the hardest lesson of all, that rock bottom wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. Marcus Thornton had thrown his wife out like trash because he thought she was nothing. He didn't know that nothing was just another word for possibility, for becoming, for rising. Elena Kingsley had risen, and she would never fall again.